we are legally required to watch this video because that is how it works on this stream. I don't make the rules, but I am happy to report that Paleozoic topped a regional this past weekend, and so, you know, you guys know how it works on this channel. We have to take a look at whether they have some new spice in the Paleozoic deck. There's like no question, right? Of course, we're going to take a look at the top 8 Eindhoven regional Paleozoic list by Rob. So let us begin.
Hi, I'm Rob Jansen and I got top 8 at the Eindhoven regional with Paleozoic. Hakuna, my data, asked me to do a deck profile, so...
What is it, by the way, with 90% of Paleozoic regional tops happening in Belgium or the Netherlands? There's like a hidden Paleozoic community in over there, and I wanna be part of it.
Here we go.
There's like, it's like Paleo is like the Dutch version of plants for all of Europe, but like in randomly in the Netherlands and Belgium, it's just Paleozoic.
We start off with 3 copies of Soldier Dragon.
Let's go.
This card generates up to 3 extra bodies by itself, and it kind of punishes opponents trying to chain block your traps. So this makes sure you always have enough monsters to use. One of the monsters that we summon is the Laundry Dragon Maid. On summon, this can mill 3 cards to the graveyard to set it up. The other target is Fulmina Dragon.
I find it funny that this card is actually being played, and I say funny in the most positive way possible because this card is very fun to play with. It is very cool that it's actually made its way into the deck. I thought when they made this card alongside Magic Colloidal Soul, I thought that Magic Colloidal Soul was the way better support card for Paleozoics, but then when I played this for the first time as well, I realized it's actually not bad, and that it's actually quite fun to play with.
Statue of the Sacred Dragon. If an opponent monster attacks, well, this is a monster card.
Soul sucks? Nah, Soul is crazy. Soul is nice.
You can bounce the opponent's monster to the hand and play...
What does this do? Okay, so this is a pendulum card that doesn't really function as a pendulum card. It's one of those really cool ways that they should do way more often with the pendulum mechanic, like to make use of it, because it's not a traditional pendulum monster. The way it works is if it's on your field and your opponent attacks, you put it back into the pendulum scale to bounce. I think you bounce the attacking monster, and then when a monster is special summoned by a trap effect, so like a Paleo or anything like that, and it's in your scale, you can bounce a monster on the field again, and then you can summon it out from the spell and trap zone if you want to. So it's like the idea is it jumps in and out of the pendulum zone, the pendulum scale, and it keeps bouncing monsters, interrupting attacks, and bouncing stuff. I think both effects are once per turn, but you can do both in the same turn, I'm pretty sure.
Is the Fulmina into the scale. When it's in the scale, if a monster is summoned by a trap effect, so for example the Paleozoics, you can target a card your opponent controls and optionally summon Fulmina. So either you use it as a level 2 body, or you just keep it in the scale for the next turn to interrupt the opponent again. And it being a pendulum has some advantages that I'll talk about later.
Ooh, what is that referring to? What is the other advantages of it being a pendulum? Are we playing pendulum synergy in this?
I played 2 copies of Backjack.
Ooh!
I cut down on the normal summons because I added a different normal summon to the deck. Backjack lets us stack the deck, grab an extra trap if we need to. I usually send this off the Fiend Griefing. So the other normal summon I added was Triple Sphere Mode.
Oh.
Because at this point, going second is really difficult for us. So if we
I mean, that is not a new development. That's kind of been like that. We kind of live with that fact, but okay. I mean, we play Sphere Mode for going second. I kind of get it. At the same time, I feel like maybe you just embrace the fact that your deck sucks going second if decks have back row removal or something like that.
The dice roll, I want to have at least some card that can help break the opponent's board and let us play the game. And Sphere Mode is just the most effective one at that. If it comes back to...
It's new as in set 5 won't win in this meta, whilst before it could work out. I mean, it always depended on the matchup, but I would argue that it's been like that for a while. that against a competent player going second without interrupting them at all with Paleo, you would usually not win.
Us at the end of the opponent's turn, we can use Rise on it. It has an effect that it cannot be attacked, so the opponent cannot attack at all. The other card that I put into the deck to make sure the opponent...
Wouldn't Lava Golem come up more Wise Fear? Because 3 is more than 2. Super
that
Poly
we get
too.
to play
Okay.
the game if we have to go second. Game 1 is Super Poly. It helps to break a board, it gives us an additional body, and the opponent cannot respond to it. So hopefully this is enough to at least set some cards and start playing. Then I played 3 copies of Pot of Desires. This card goes +1. You always want extra traps, and your banishes don't really matter if you can grab a Leon.
It's kind of weird, but Pot of Desires, I mean, it is good in this deck. It's just the annoying part is that it can really mess with it randomly can mess with your grind game. It can mess with your trap trick targets. Other than that, I mean, it makes opening Leoncolia a lot better if you have Pot of Desires with it, because you probably banish something that's worth returning to the graveyard. So it basically turns Leoncolia into Morella, which is pretty good.
Coilia, you can even put the card back, so that's an extra advantage of the banish. If you banish a rollback, you can just put it into your grave and you just set it up. So then the Paleozoics, we have triple Morella.
Wait, that's the spells? You're not even playing grass? Is this not 60? Surely this is 60 cards, right? Surely. Still no grass? Okay.
Sends any trap from the deck to the graveyard. Usually it will be rollback or rise to full height. Sometimes you have to send an
I didn't have grass. Okay, but you would have played it if you had it. Okay, that's all right.
extra Paleo if you don't have enough. Then there's Leoncolia. It puts a banished card back into the graveyard to recycle usually your rollback, but it can also recycle rise to full height or backjack. Then we play 3 Dynamiscus, 3 Canadia, and 3 Olonoids. These are just the best names. They interrupt your opponent and their Paleo names are summoned from the graveyard. 3 Transaction Rollback. You just want as many of this card as you can have, because you can send it from the deck to the graveyard. If you open it, it's usually not live, but if you can get to...
Was there reasoning in there? There was no reasoning, and I kind of get it, honestly, because once you start playing mostly level 2s, I mean, first of all, Sphere Mode is kind of shit with reasoning, isn't it? Can Sphere Mode be special summoned? Does reasoning stop at Sphere Mode, or does it skip it? I think it stops at Sphere Mode, because Sphere Mode I think can be special summoned, but I'm not sure.
A Cambroraster, you can send it from your own field to the graveyard to set up your place. Once you have it in the graveyard, it's fantastic. It copies any of your traps, even skipping the cost of them. Speaking of traps to copy, Elemental Burst is the strongest one. It wipes the opponent's field and
can't be special summoned, but can be normal summoned, so it stops. Yeah, because that's the restriction on reasoning, right? It says until you hit a monster that can be normal summoned, and Sphere Mode is a normal summon, so it will stop at it and just send it to the graveyard.
You can keep repeating that as long as you can recycle your rollbacks. To start setting that up, we have triple Needlebug Nest. It just mills 5 cards, put more cards in the graveyard, and it's a trap to chain Paleos too. Then there's Fiend Griefing. This is a bit of an interruption and consistency card in one. It shuffles back an opponent's monster from the graveyard into their deck, and then it can send a backjack to the graveyard to trigger that, set up another trap. So in a sense it can be used to get 2 Paleo summons. Then we have Rise to Full Height and Waboku to protect our Paleos from being destroyed by battle. Since they are unaffected by monster effects, protecting them from battle is the best way to make sure they stick around on the board. Opponents usually don't have many spell trap ways to remove at least multiple of those. Then we play triple Daruma Cannon. This can also protect us from battle by just flipping your opponent's board face down, but it is also very good at just interrupting an opponent plays, make sure they cannot link off the monsters that they have on the field, synchro summon with them, XD summon with them.
Can Fiend Griefing be activated if we ran out of Fiends? Yes. The send on Fiend Griefing is optional. You can use Fiend Griefing to just shuffle back a monster from the graveyard without sending a Fiend.
The only thing they can do is tribute them for a tribute summon or fusion summon. if you use this and you have a rollback in the grave, your opponent knows you can just do it again if necessary. So it's a good position to be in. Then we have triple trap trick. This is my favorite card in the deck because it's by itself it means it's 2 trap activations, which means we can trigger a paleo twice. It's the best target for rollback because it also generates a trap on the field without getting the restriction of only being able to use 1 more trap. So essentially having trap trick and rollback in the graveyard means we can access any trap that we still have 2 copies of in the deck. Then for drawing cards I play 2 Hope for Escape and 2 Balance of Judgment. Hope for Escape gets better once we've paid life points, which we always try to do with transaction rollback.
You know what the cool thing for me personally is when I'm watching Paleozoic deck profiles is, well, 2 things. The first thing is to see if anyone has discovered some new wacky synergies or any new cards that they've added into the deck. But the second thing is just like, even though Paleozoic is a 60 card deck and technically has a lot of room for a lot of different cards, there's so many different things that we know about now that they theoretically are playable in Paleo. Like there's like 10 different spell cards you can decide to play, right? Reasoning, Desires, Morganite, Trap Tantalizing Tune, Grass, all those, right? There's so many different options of cards that you can play if you want to, and the same is for draw traps, right? There's Hope, there's Balance, there's others, there's Reckless, whatever, right? And it's I find it very fun to just see how exactly people are combining them, right? Like I've tried out most of these cards, and just to see what kind of conclusions other people have reached on which kind of card they preferred and all that is kind of cool.
A Balance of Judgment gets very strong if we're behind in card advantage, and it potentially could draw like 5 or 6 cards to get us back into the game.
I personally believe that playing multiple draw traps is probably not right, because drawing draw traps, like, you can't draw them too often because they will not be live most of the time. I personally think my favorite one is Balance of Judgment at this point. Let's just, like, if I see Balance of Judgment or I have access to it via rollback or trap trick, I can just use all my interruptions very, very freely, make my opponent set up and then draw back into it. But I think 4 is a little much. The only problem, and here's the thing, if you're playing Desires and you only play 2 copies of Balance of Judgment and no draw traps at all, no other draw traps at all, if you banish 1 Balance of Judgment with Desires, you can't trap trick for it anymore, which means you're probably not going to see the card.
In the actual tournament, neither of these were great. I would have rather had live trap cards in their place to interrupt your opponent, because I could draw a few cards, but it usually wasn't enough to get back into the game after that. I do think
playing a draw option is mandatory, though. Personally, for my personal experience, I think Paleozoic is not good enough at beating opponents like without drawing a bunch of extra cards in a lot of scenarios.
Last, I play 3 copies of Soul of the Supreme King.
Oh.
The field effect of this lets me pay half my life points to summon Supreme King Zark from my extra deck, with its effects negated, and it has to return in my next end phase to the extra deck. Then if the opponent activates a spell, card or effect while I control Zark, I can banish the Soul and the Zark to summon one of up to one of each exceeds.
See, that's what I mean. We've been talking about how they've arranged all the options that we already knew about, and now they've also thrown their own little spice into it that I've never played before.
Dragon, Synchro Dragon, Fusion Dragon, or Pendulum Dragon from my deck, graveyard or extra deck. The reason I played this is that we will get to the dragons in the extra deck soon. Some of them are really good in the current meta. One of them people just struggle to get over. If you summon Zark, you can also try and wipe the board if you combine it with the Ruma cannon. I will also explain that in a moment.
Oh yeah, so that's true. Yeah. Because this card summons Zark, and Zark has the mandatory effect on summon to destroy all cards your opponent controls, but it is negated by the trap card. But if you can flip it face down with Karma Cannon, it'll reset.
Deck. I play 1 copy of Camberraster, 1 of Anomalocaris, and 1 of Opavinia.
Nah.
In hindsight, that's
blasphemy.
Wrong. You should always play 2 copies of the Opavinia.
One daddy?
Anomalocaris is a must-have card, but I usually only need 1 in a game. Camberraster I really like, because once you resolve the Opavinia, you can, for example, get a Morella, you can activate it, you can chain a Paleo in the grave. Then you have a Paleo in the grave on the field, and the Opavinia to make the Camberraster. Camberraster can send an opponent's back row as well.
I guess the extra deck is very tight because we're playing all the Zark stuff.
To set another Paleo trap, which could also be Morella. You can activate it, you can chain another Paleo in the graveyard, you get another monster again. And you have 2 Morella Sands, you can basically set up a transaction rollback with any trap in the graveyard that you like. And then with the Camberraster and the additional Paleo you have, you can then go into Gigantic Sprite, which I usually only use to go then into Darnard and Zeus. It rarely comes up that I use Gigantic Sprite, but sometimes you just want to get the Soldier Dragon from the deck. But since I'm playing such a small package in the extra deck, I don't really have much of a follow-up in the extra deck. I don't really see the need to get more bodies onto the board. I just made a Zeus, tried to lock the game down from there with Zeus and my traps. Then we have the Mud Dragon and Garura for super poly targets. These cover most of the whole game. And then we get the Startled Venom Fusion Dragon, which is both a super poly target and the Fusion Dragon for the Zark trap. We have Brave Eyes Pendulum Dragon. I don't have the Crystal Clearing Synchro Dragon on me because I borrowed it from a friend. And we have the Odd Eyes Rebellion Xyz Dragon. The Starving Venom I only played because it's a super poly target and the Fusion Dragon. In hindsight, I should not have played this. I should have just played the second Opavinia instead. Brave Eyes, its relevant effect is that it negates all monsters with 0 attack. Which means once you have this on the field,
bro, can't get ashed.
Your opponent's Yugioh cards all have 0 attack, they will all be negated. If they are playing Runic, Summon the Fusion, they have 0, most of them have 0 attack. They cannot, for example, search the fountain or grab it back from the graveyard.
Okay, that's cringe.
In the tournament, I did not see Soul against Yubel, sadly. But what came up was my opponent tried to Ghost Mourner me. It was negated because of Brave Eyes. The Crystal Clearing Synchro Dragon has a once per turn spell or trap negate. And it can chain to a monster to make himself unaffected until the end phase and gain attack. That makes it a really difficult monster to get rid of, as most decks just struggle to out the card on top of the traps that we already use. So it can win games on its own.
I'm gonna be honest with you, the reason why I'm not super familiar with all of these, even though that Zark trap has been flipped on me a bunch of times, is because, like, whenever that happens, I just stop activating spells, right? Like, I don't know how realistic it is. I guess it depends on the format and the deck you're facing. I don't know how realistic it is that your opponent will give you all those cards, right? Because they might just, depending on their hand, they might just say, like, okay, I'm not gonna activate any spells. But then when I'm thinking about that further, I'm like, okay, decks like Snake Eyes or Yubel, they can't really do anything without activating spell cards, right? Like, what do they really have without spell cards, right? Like, what do they do, right? No original, no deception, no field spells, no whatever. Like, they can't really do anything.
Now the Rebellion Xyz Dragon, what I tell my opponent is I cannot use this effect on the field.
I guess they can go, let's say they get lucky and open Snake Eye Ash, which is a one-off, but if they have Snake Eye Ash and they resolve it, they could make an SP to banish the Zark first before playing. That would work, theoretically.
Don't have Xyz material, but if you destroy it, I can put it in the scale. This means opponents are not so scared of this card. They would draw it, if they have to choose, they would draw it out one of the other monsters that I have.
You know what's crazy? These cards, I've never seen them in my life, genuinely. Because I've never activated a spell against the Supreme Soul, whatever. This thing, never seen it ever. And
then in my turn, I put the Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon Overlord on top of it. And this monster can attack 3 times. Which is oftentimes enough to just swing for game. Which is a problem the deck has. This fixes the problem that games take too long. You can just go into this. This by itself is 9,000 damage. Then we have the Zark himself. If he's summoned, he has a mandatory effect to destroy all cards your opponent controls. The soul summons him negated, but if you...
You should play Supreme King Paleo in Master Duel. I've seen great success with it. We can add it to the deck for the wheel today. Like I said, we're gonna work on some of my deck lists in order to try something new. We can throw it in there. I don't mind.
Chain, for example, the Ruma Cannon. You put him face down, then the negation will be gone, and it can actually resolve. The Zark Wipe is how I won one of my Centurion matches. And then we have the Arc Ray Dragon.
This is something genuinely I've encountered this for the first time like a week or two ago in Master Duel. I did not know that they could just replace the Zark with another version of it that also counts as Zark, which basically I think that's a big deal, because what I said earlier about I was trying to hold my spell cards and not use them, it was like, okay, well, the original Zark gets sent away during their next end phase, right? So like theoretically the spell card lock only works for one turn, but because you can replace it with this, that is kind of good, right? Like that is kind of crazy, because it stops your opponent has to basically play a spell card eventually. They cannot just wait until your Zark is gone. That I find kind of appealing.
This one can be summoned by using Supreme King Zark as a tribute. He's
now, please,
always considered
please tell me that these are not all ultra rares, because they're like protagonist anime cards in Master Duel. Damn it.
Supreme King Zark, so even if you do that, the soul in the graveyard will remain live. But the nice part is, on summon, Arc Ray can place a pendulum monster from the deck into the pendulum scale. So then we can place the Fulmina in the pendulum scale.
Wait, when do we get this?
On summon, Arc Ray can place a pendulum monster from the deck into the pendulum scale.
Ah, that's cool.
So then we can place the Fulmina in the pendulum scale.
Wait, that is cool.
To be used with your next trap. This card is a really good control card if you're like in the grind game. So placing it from the deck is actually fantastic for the deck. So then we go to the side deck. Because this deck goes into time, like every round we play triple Dogwood. This wins the game in time. Going second is difficult, and we go into time a lot, so Lava Golem is also a fantastic card to use. When we go into time...
Did you put any cards into your side deck that do not have the word life points on it, is my question.
We have to side out all the life points paying cards, so that's the Scatter Shot, the Hope for Escape, the Transaction Rollback, the Hope for Escape, the Elemental Burst cannot be used anymore. So instead with Morelli we sent the Blaze Accelerator Reload for the board wipe of Scatter.
Those say life points on it. Those say, I mean, maybe they say damage instead.
Scatter Shot. This also won me several games. In fact,
technically the reload doesn't say it.
I won in game 3 on time, so these cards were really necessary to win those rounds. Outside of that, I played triple Dimension Barrier.
Yo, that card does not say life points.
Against most of the decks. And you can just keep looping it every turn once you get it set up, and the opponent just cannot play the game. And I tried to do the same with Different Dimension Ground, which covers some matchups that Dimensional Barrier doesn't. I think this is the least important. This card came up the least in my side deck, at least. I would maybe consider cutting this for something else. So,
what does winning on time mean? If you go to a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament, there is a timer for each round, unlike if you're playing Master Duel, where every game has its individual timer. But like if you go to a tournament and you play round 1, there's a 45-minute timer, and once the time hits 0, the player with more life points wins the game. And certain decks that are designed to be a lot slower than other decks or play very long and grindy games really have to worry about that, because they will get into time more often than other decks, and they will like essentially be forced to adjust their game plan for later. For when it's very late into the round, for example, a card like Transaction Rollback, which requires you to pay half your life points, is not very good, because you're basically going to lose the game because of it, so you have to like take it out if it gets late into the round.
What I did not play in my extra deck was Almirage, to link off a backcheck if I draw it.
Just don't draw it.
This did not really come up because every time I had a backjack, I had a way to discard it. But moving forward, you would either have to cut some of the Zark targets or the Super Poly targets in order to play. I would probably play Almirage and Totally Awesome again on top of the second OPB.
All right, there's no Toad. That's criminal.
Yeah, that I would put in first. I also considered playing Typhon, but I think Typhon in the current meta does not do enough to break a board that I can just put it into my extra deck and expect to have a chance going second. So I decided to just not play it because in testing it did not come up enough. So a few shoutouts. A shout out to Tim for letting me borrow the Crystal Clearing Synchro Dragon. Shout out to Ruben for telling me to play 3 sphere modes in my main deck instead of 2. Those sphere modes definitely came up in those game ones. Shout out to Yuri for being my paleo brother. And of course my friends who made the day a lot of fun.
My paleo brother. All right, sick. Nice. We're gonna try the Supreme King Zark technology in paleo later. I can add it to the wheel.